If there's one thing I will never pass up when I see it at the thrift store, it's a decently sized set of matching nightstands. If you're refinishing furniture for a profit, it's pretty impossible to go wrong with a set like these. They can either be refinished into a new wood tone or painted in a neutral color scheme that's easy for a lot of people to fit into their bedroom decor, and they will always bring in a good profit. If I were gonna sell a set this size in my pretty rural market, I wouldn't be asking any less than $500, maybe even $600 for the refinished set. But instead of playing it safe on these, I wanna take them in a slightly more niche direction. I'll still be improving their condition and boosting their value, but I wanna do something a little more unexpected. These don't have a maker's mark on them anywhere, but they are stamped on the back with this tradition style name and number, and they're giving off higher quality Dixie, Broyhill, or Thomasville vibes, definitely from the 70s. They all produced a lot of bedroom sets in this speckled pecan finish with the chunky Spanish style handles and trim work. All of the trim does look like it's solid wood. It's not pecan, that's just referencing the color and finish, but they're oak. And the tops and side panels are that oak wood veneer over top of some plywood. The drawers are double dovetailed or have dovetail joinery on the front and the back of the drawer box. And these squeaky handles are nice heavy brass. They're both in really good condition with the exception of the failing finish and a little bit of veneer damage on the tops. I was totally happy to pay $40 a piece for these guys, but I did have a 20% off coupon that I got from making a donation to the thrift store earlier, so I only paid $64. I am planning on painting these, so my apologies if you've already got your heart set on a restoration or new wood finish, but I promise I'll do them justice and, like I said, increase their value. But the first step for me is always to pull out the drawers, remove all the hardware, and clean every surface with a good degreaser. I actually do really love these handles, just not for these tables. They're really nice quality, so I'm definitely going to tuck them away in my hardware collection, and I'll find another piece of furniture to use them on one day. I think I want to do 2 knobs on each drawer instead of the one long handle, and these holes are awkwardly placed anyways, so I'll need to pry off this extra panel and then fill in all the holes once I get everything washed down. There's some sort of something splattered on here and lots of gunk built up behind this old hardware. Any degreasing cleaner you like will get this job done, but I need to make sure that I'm not only getting the obvious dirt and dust off the surface, but I need to remove any traces of oils, waxes, or silicones that are in a lot of popular furniture polishes, because those can really mess up a new finish, whether it's paint or stain. There's just one small chunk out of the veneer on this table, but the other one has a bigger issue going on. This swollen, warped, and cracked section is probably water damage, and it's actually come away from the substrate a lot more than it looks. I can feel where it's not attached when I touch it. I think I'm going to cut around the edges where I can feel that it's let go and then peel up the damaged stuff, and then I'll mix up some heavy-duty filler to patch it. Well, that went a little further than I thought, but this filler is going to take care of the negative space. And I think I'm just going to keep mixing up batches of this, not too much at a time because it cures really fast, and give both tops a kind of skim coat to fill in the deep wood grain. I'm not worried about filling in all the grain on these tables, but if I don't fill in the rest of the grain around this big patch, it will still look really obvious once it's painted because it's a completely different texture. I actually love the look of painted oak grain texture, but if you wanted a completely smooth finish, you would need to fill in all the grain on each and every surface. But this top surface just seems like a logical or natural stopping point for me. Now that I'm doing this though, I think I'm going to regret my decision to use this particular filler, not for the big patch, but for the grain filling. This is going to be really hard to sand smooth. Usually I like to use a hard epoxy filler for hardware holes too, but I don't even think my little detail sander is going to fit into this recessed bit on the drawers. So I'm going to use a softer, much easier to sand, I guess, standard wood filler to fill in these holes and some of the grain texture on these center panels too. The tops are fully cured now, so I'm going to start sanding off the excess filler with some 120 grit. I'm going to be removing most of it. I really just want to leave what's settled down into that open grain. Ugh, the 3x4 sander just barely fits into these top drawers, and there's not even enough wiggle room for it to vibrate properly, which is what I expected. So I'm switching over to this little detail sanding grip to smooth out the filler in here instead. Okay, I can already tell that the holes have sunk a bit and are going to need another layer, which probably means the grain does too. That's why I usually go for the epoxy filler that won't shrink or sink as it dries. This stuff will work fine. It's just going to take a little longer. I think I'll use up the rest of this little pot to do another skim coat over the tabletops too. It is totally normal to need a few passes to get grain like this completely filled in. Now that the filler is dealt with, I'm switching to a foam abrasive to help me scuff sand the rest of the surfaces with all of their curves and details without accidentally misshaping anything or grinding it flat. This should buff out any minor dents or scratches, but mostly I want to create a little bit of texture in the slick factory finish so that my next layer can get a really strong grip. You don't need to invest in a fancy sander or even these foam sanding pads though. All of this can totally be done by hand too. Again, it just takes a little more time and labor. A dry microfiber cloth will pick up the last of the fine sanding dust, and then I'm going to prop these up off the floor so I can prime and paint all the way to the bottom without worrying about them sticking to the paper or kicking up dust into wet paint. Since the top layer of this plywood backer is already peeling away, I'm just going to grab my scraper and take off the rest of it. The backs don't need to be fully finished, but I always feel better when they're at least tidy. Next, I'm going to mask off the drawer interiors so that I don't end up with primer or paint overspray inside those. Normally, I'd use bin shellac-based primer, but it is bright white, and with the color I'm planning on using on these tables, that would mean a lot more coats of paint to get nice full coverage. So instead, today, I'm using this flat black spray can primer to bond to the surface and even out all the different textures. That way my paint will have a nice consistent base to sit on. I've let the primer dry for a few hours, so now I'm just going to lightly sand everything to knock down any texture that's dried in it, then dust again, always dusting around here. And with the primer on now, I can already tell that I need to visit these hardware holes again. I'm going to use Bondo glazing and spot putty this time. It's made for filling in hairline cracks and pinholes, so maybe it'll finally be the trick to making these holes disappear. For paint, I'm going with Sherwin-Williams Emerald Urethane Enamel in this gorgeous, dark and moody color called Marooned. It's going to dry a little darker than it looks in the can, but I think it's going to be such a fun way to get that rich, dramatic feel of a dark wood finish or black paint finish without being so on the nose. These deep jewel tones totally remind me of the 90s burgundy and hunter green trends, but they're definitely current again now. This is a super durable paint that doesn't need any additional layer of top coat. So even though it's got a bit of a longer recoat time at 4 hours, I get to skip the time and expense of the whole poly step. I've got about 10 ounces of paint filtered into my sprayer, and I don't think I need to thin this out with any water. It is on the thicker side of what I'd like to spray with this gun, but it's handled it before, so it should be okay now too. Because it's a thicker consistency paint, it's a lot slower coming out. So all I'm going to do is slow down my pace and take my time, letting enough paint hit the surface that it stays wet while I get the next pass on, but not too much that it starts to drip or sag before it dries. Man, the fill on these drawers is still not right. Okay, one more layer of Bondo, and then I give up. I'm gonna go thick this time. I'm so frustrated, but this is not the first time and it will not be the last time, so I just need to stick with it until it's right. Once this layer dries, I'll sand it again, dust it again, and put on my second coat of paint. I'm gonna go back to my squishy pad to see if I can get enough of the excess filler off to make it smooth, but also trying not to sand too much that will take all the filler out that I've been trying to build up on here. I did find a few more spots on the tabletops too that were looking a little more grainy than I wanted, so I put some more filler up there too. I'm just gonna clean the dried enamel off of the tip of my gun with a little bit of acetone, and then I can spray on coat number 2. I ran out of hours in the day yesterday to be able to put a third coat on these. I do want to do a third coat, mostly just to cover all the spots that I ended up sanding back to the primer or back to the original finish yesterday, so that everything has at least 2 coats on it. So I'll do the third coat, leave it to dry probably most of the day, and then I need to measure out and drill new holes for the knobs, probably put some wood conditioner on the insides of the drawers just to freshen them up and bring them back to life. And then these should be good to go. The paint is dry, but I still need to be gentle with it for the next few days while it starts to cure to its full hardness. For now, I'm gonna get the drawers unwrapped and make myself a little paper template to figure out where I need to drill new hardware holes. I do have a couple of different styles of hardware jigs for measuring this kind of thing, but on drawers like these with this really chunky trim that keeps the jig from laying flat, it's kind of hard to get an accurate placement. So paper to the rescue. Once I've cut a rectangle the same size as that inlaid area, I can measure out a center line, mark where I want the new knobs to go, and then just transfer that onto the drawer fronts with a punch. This feed and wax is a mix of orange oil, carnauba wax, and beeswax that conditions dried out wood and just makes everything look new again. I'm gonna buff it into the surface with a little wax brush, let it soak in for a few minutes, and then wipe away any excess with a rag. I wouldn't put any clothes or fabric in these drawers right away, but after a few days, once this is fully dried down, it won't leave any marks or stains on clothes. Oh, and I'm adding a little extra right onto the metal guides and the wooden tracks inside the tables, just to lubricate things and keep the drawers sliding smoothly. Okay, let's recap and take a look back at the dusty, neglected nightstands that I found sitting at the thrift store. Solid construction with great bones, but a few blemishes that made them a bit of a tough sell. A lot of filler, some paint, and a little patience later, and now they look like something straight out of a boutique furniture shop. This rich, moody maroon finish has completely transformed them. They're bold and dramatic, but still timeless enough to work in so many different spaces. The sheen from this enamel gives them a really durable, professional look and makes them feel brand new again. This is exactly why I love flipping pieces like this, taking something overlooked and giving it a new life and adding value. Not bad for a couple of $32 thrift store tables, right? From dated and dusty to dark and dramatic, I'd say it's a pretty amazing update. Thank you so much for following along through yet another project with me. I'll catch you all next time.